Oh guys, where do I even begin? So Wednesday morning, 14th of June I believe it was an exciting morning. My mum and I were set to fly to the Netherlands. It was just like, the hype was real. So that morning we headed to the airport to check in because our flight was at 9 AM. We had a morning flight and it was all going, you know, it was all good. We wait in the line, I get up to the counter and I go first and they scan my passport and she looks confused and I was just like, okay, this is all right. And then she looks even more confused and she goes, oh, you can't check in. And I was just like, what do you mean I can't check in? She's like, I'm not sure. There's an error that I've never seen before. And I was just like, how does that even happen? And so she gets someone else to look at it and they're like, no, I don't know. It just won't let us check you in. And so I was, panic started to set in, but I was like straight faced, like, it'll be fine. So they go to do my mum's to see, you know, if hers works. And now she's got a different nationality passport, so I thought, you know, maybe that would have something to do with it. I don't know. We're on the same booking, so that, like, if mine didn't work, hers technically shouldn't work either. So they go to scan hers and sure enough they say she can't book in either. And then so they call a third person over to come have a look. And this is a manager and she looks at it and I don't remember exactly, but she figured it out and realized that what had happened is, because we had 3 flights to get to the Netherlands. We had flight 1, which was Auckland to Guangzhou I think is how it's pronounced. Flight 2 was Guangzhou to Beijing, and flight 3 was Beijing to Netherlands. Sorry, I've actually been sick, so I've got a dry cough. But what had happened was our flight from Guangzhou to Beijing had been cancelled, and they can't put you on connecting flights if one of them has been cancelled. So my mum goes to the side and she starts talking to them while they try to figure it out. And so I kind of just stand there waiting 20 minutes, you know, I'm talking to random people in line and talking about where we're going and stuff. It was really nice. I'm not a morning person, but morning people are really friendly. So that was nice. They were kind of just like keeping me occupied, and then, you know, 15-20 minutes had passed and I'm like, we need to like get in, like we need to check in and we need to go through security and all this kind of stuff. Because we had to be checked in by 7, and at this stage it was like 5 to 7 and I was like, what's going on? So I go over to my mum, there's someone else there who seems to have the same issue. Turns out she was on the exact same 3 flights as us, and so they said, no worries, we'll override the system. Worst thing. So they overrid the system and they managed to check us in, got our bags, and we're like, okay, what happens when we arrive in Guangzhou? Like, our connecting flight is like immediately after. And they're like, no, it'll all be sorted when you get there, like the airlines will know what to do, you know, they're the ones that have cancelled the flight. And so we're like, okay, like, sure, whatever. So we check in and all of that, and then we go upstairs, have some breakfast, wait around for a little bit before we eventually head to the plane. And so at this stage everything was going fine, and we're like, you know, it'll be all right. We'll just, maybe they'll put us on another flight, or I don't know, maybe they'll fly us direct, who knows. So yeah, so we hop on the flight and take off for Guangzhou. Alright, so then about 1 hour into the flight, the air hostesses, is that what they're called? I don't know. Anyway, they came through with the food and I was like, okay, this must be like an early lunch or something. And then so they started coming down and then they started saying like dinner, and I was just like, what? Like, it's literally maybe 10 or 11 AM at this stage, so I'm like, why are they serving dinner? But anyway, I took the food because I wasn't going to complain. Watched some Netflix. I had Orange is the New Black and I was so excited to watch it. And also there was like nobody on this plane, at least where we were, so it was really nice, relaxing. As soon as they took our food, like once we'd finished eating our dinner, they shut all the lights off and shut all the blind things, and I was just like, what? Because obviously it was in the morning and we were going to Guangzhou, which is only 4 hours behind New Zealand, so it wouldn't have been nighttime. So I don't know what was going on at this stage, and I was just like, oh well, like everyone's sleeping, I'm just gonna watch my Netflix. And yeah, I don't know if I mentioned, but this was an 11.5-12 hour flight, so we had a long way to go. So about 6 hours later, I'd had a nap. I was on to episode 5 of orange is the new black, and then they turn the lights on all of a sudden, and I'm like, okay, like what's going on? And then they start bringing the drinks out, and you know by this stage when they bring the drinks out, it means that food follows. So food did follow, and I was like, I wonder what we're going to eat now, because by this stage it would have been, I don't know, like, ah gosh, I don't know, it was 6 hours later. And so maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon, something like that, and it was breakfast. Like the meal was breakfast, and I was just like, what? Like so confused. It was messing with me because like dinner for breakfast, breakfast for afternoon tea, I didn't know what was going on. But again, it had been 6 hours. I was hungry. So I got some food, watched some more Netflix, and then had another nap, because we still had like 6 hours to go. Like it's a long flight. So anyway, at this stage everything seemed to be going alright. Like the flight was really nice, there was no turbulence, anything like that. The air hostess on the planes, they were so lovely, so friendly. Yeah, it was all good, but I kept thinking like, what's going to happen when we land? Like, where do we go? And I was like, you know what, they said they'd have it all sorted. They said once you land you'll know exactly where to go, and like just go through the security and then go to the like arrivals desk where they'll sort it out or something like that. So anyway, we arrive and we ended up sitting on the plane for a little bit, which was really weird. And then eventually they opened the plane up, and of course in China, because the airport is so massive, you don't actually get off the plane and get into the airport. You get off the plane and then you get on a bus. So we had to wait for this bus to come. And when we stepped out of that plane, bearing in mind that it's winter in New Zealand right now, it was 36 degrees in China, and it was smoggy and it was humid, and it was just like the whole sky was grey. And I didn't know if that was the smog or if it was just cloudy, but there was no blue sky, and it was just like this heat wave of rubbish smell hits you, and it was just like potent. Especially after being on like a plane where it's air conditioned, and then going to that, it was just like, oh my goodness. So anyway, we hop on this bus, which takes us like 20 minutes like driving around before we eventually get off the bus and into the airport. And it was kind of cool because it was just so nice. It was cool driving around like the tarmac. And we're like, you know, it's all going well. Our friend Juliana is her name, she was also on the bus, so we're like, cool, like she's here, she made it with us. We'll meet with her when we get up and find out, you know, where do we go. So we get, as I mentioned, we get into the airport, we got this escalator thing, and then it was just like thousands of people, and just like no lines, it was just people, and then there were lines behind the people. So we're like, where on earth do we go? So we go and ask someone, and he was like, no, you go this way. And we're like, our flight was cancelled, and he's like, yes, this way. Really grumpy, not friendly at all. So we're like, okay, like let's just hop in this line. So we're in this line, and it's got like check-in and baggage claim and all that kind of stuff. We're like, that's what we need to do because we've got baggage, and the other line you can't get your baggage. And we were told when we arrive we have to collect our baggage. So we go on that line, and we're in that line for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, like slowly just going back and forth with our check-on luggage, and it was super hot in the airport as well. Eventually we get to the front, and we're like, thank goodness, like we can go through and get our bags now, because we were getting worried what was happening with our bags because it had been so long. So I get to I was the one at the front, so I get to this, who was it? I think it was a lady at this stage. She asked for my boarding pass, and I was like, I don't have one, because I gave her my boarding pass for the flight I'd just been on. She's like, no, you're connecting one. And I was like, oh, I don't have one because the flight was cancelled, so they're going to give us one when we get through. And she was just like, no. And I was just like, what do you mean no? And she's like, no, you can't come through. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you have to have a connecting flight. And I was like, yeah, but our flight was cancelled. And she's like, how did you get on your flight? And I was just like, they just overrid it in the system. And she just was like, no, you have to go that way. And she just pointed, and I was like, but there's nothing there. She's like, you have to go that way. And then Juliana and my mum, they were in other lines as well, and they had the exact same thing. They were just like, no, like go away. And so we're like, what the heck? Okay. So at this stage we were like, what's going on? So we go to where she says there's nothing there. So we go talk to someone, and he tells us to get back in the line we were just in. And we were like, no way, that can't be right. And then he goes, try that way. And so we're like, okay. Bearing in mind, by this time it had been like 45 minutes, an hour. And so we go around the corner and we find another queue. And this was for domestic transfers. And we're like, but we're not transferring because we have to pick up our bags. And it says no baggage claims. But we're like, you know what? Let's just go in this line, find out. So we hop in that line for another half an hour. And so we're waiting in line, and this time we decide all three of us to go up to the counter together. That way we're not taking up three things trying to figure out what's going on. And this is where, like, my perception of bad customer service, it was just like this reality check of New Zealand, yes, there's bad customer service, but oh my goodness, it is nothing like the Guangzhou airport. Like, that airport, just in general, the whole entire trip there and back is just the worst customer service I have ever had in my life. It was just like, what? I'll explain more of it later, and also in like a vlog in the future of the trip back. For this, let's just carry on with the trip there. So I had to write down notes because otherwise I would forget. So where are we at? Alright, yeah, so we get to the front of the line, and bearing in mind at this stage we were literally the last people in line for the type of line that we were in. And so we go up to this guy and he straight away wants our boarding pass, and we were just like, we don't have a boarding pass because our flight was cancelled. So they booked us on the flight, and they said that it would be sorted by the time we land. And he's like, so you don't have a boarding pass? We're like, no. And he's like, I need a boarding pass. And we were just like, we don't have a boarding pass. And so he tries to send us back to the line again. Like, why is everyone sending us everywhere else? It's literally like nobody wanted to help. Like, there is no customer service. It was just everyone wanted us gone, and we were like, no, we just came from that line. Juliana was there, and she was just so stern. She was amazing. Like, she had her sassy pants on that day. It was great. And she was just like, no, you need to sort this for us. Like, we've just been in that line. And so he was like, you don't have a boarding pass again. And we were just like, no. And he was like, why? And we're like, okay, we told him so many times, we're like, our flight was cancelled by your airline, so we need to get another flight. And he was like, okay, you need another flight. We're like, yes. And bearing in mind, this guy had a badge on saying I can speak English, but when we could tell he understood us, he just was just like, no fucks given. Excuse my language, but honestly it was just like he did not care. So eventually when he's like, okay, so you want me to book you on a new flight? And we're like, yes, if you can, like, we just want to know who can do that. And he was like, oh. He sighed, literally rolled his eyes, got up and walked away and went into an office. And we were just like, okay, hopefully he's sorting that out. So we stand there waiting, like literally 5-10 minutes. He comes back out and he has these boarding passes. And so we arrived at 4:45. We were supposed to arrive at 4:45 p.m. on the Wednesday. We actually only got into the airport at 5:30, and by this stage it was probably 7:30 at night. So we'd been waiting in lines and waiting for him forever. So this is 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday. He says, okay, you can get on a flight on a Friday at 12:30 a.m. and we were just like, no. Like, we need to be in the Netherlands in 12 hours. Like, by this stage we'd missed our other flight that was cancelled, so we couldn't get it, which means we also couldn't get our flight from Beijing to Netherlands. But luckily the flight that he'd given us was from Guangzhou to the Netherlands, so completely bypassed the Beijing part. And we're just like, no, like, we need to be somewhere, we need to get there, because obviously we needed to see certain people on Thursday in the Netherlands because they were flying out on Friday. And my mum really wanted to see her family member, and Juliana, who we were with, she had booked accommodation and to meet her friends in Amsterdam. And it was just like, why? Like, we were only supposed to be there for 2 hours and he wanted us to be there for a whole like 30 hours. And it was, we were just like, is there any note, like, is there any bookings any sooner? And at this stage I'd text Trav and asked them to call House of Travel because they're the ones who actually made all our bookings. So we were just like, why have they not contacted us about this? Like, and in our whole flight they'd done nothing to try book us onto a connecting flight. And so we found out from House of Travel that there was another flight at 10 AM the next day, and which was only like 12 hours later. And they were just like, so we asked him about that flight and he was just like, no. I'm like, what do you mean no? Like, is it full? He was just like, no, you can't go on it. And we're just like, what the heck? And eventually he's like, the flight's fully booked. And we're just like, why don't you just say that from the start? Anyway, so we were like, okay, whatever, like, yes, we'll go on this 12:30 AM flight on Friday. What are we gonna do until then? Because it's like 30 hours later. And so he was like, oh, you need accommodation. And we're like, yeah, like, yes. And so he's like, you can go get accommodation when you check in. And so we were just like, well, like, how do we get there, and food and all that kind of stuff? And he was just like, 12:30 AM flight. And we were just like, yeah, we know that, but like, how do we organize accommodation and stuff? And oh my goodness, it was so frustrating. So we got to the point where, like, okay, like, this guy's obviously not going to help us, so let's just take these boarding passes and let's go through. And he's like, oh no, you don't go through here. So we're like, okay, well, where do we go? And he was like, in the other line. So the first line that we were in, we had to go back to that line. And by this stage, another plane had come in. So there were hundreds, if not 1,000 people back in that line again. And we were just like, oh my goodness. I think by this stage it was 8 o'clock at night. And so we were just like, okay, so we go to get our passports back. And first of all, he didn't have mine. I was like, oh, I need my passport too. And he's like, oh. So he just hands it over. And I was like, thanks. And we also, when we arrived, we had to fill out arrival cards, I think it was, yeah. And he didn't hand it back. And so I was like, oh, I need my arrival card as well. And he's like, oh, you didn't give me one. And I was like, no, I did. And he's like, no. And I was like, yeah, I did. And he's like, you probably dropped it. And I was like, what? Like, what the hell, man? And Juliana was like, no, she gave it to you. You probably dropped it. And he was just like, no. And then I was like, no, you definitely have it. Like, I physically gave it to him myself. And he was like, what, you want to come in here and look for it? And we were just like, oh my gosh. And she's like, yeah, I will. And I was like, oh my gosh. And he was like, look, there's nothing here. And then so she goes around the side and she's like, what's that on the ground? And he's like, paper. And she's like, it's her card. And he was like, he picks it up and then he sees the name and realizes that, yeah, it's mine. And he did drop it. And he's like, ugh. And he goes to hand it to me. And I was just like, I was so pissed by this thing. I just grabbed it and walked off. And I don't do that. I was just like, in my head I'll be thinking it, but I wouldn't actually ever do it. And I was just like, whatever. I just grabbed it and we went, hopped back in this line. We were in the line for another 30 minutes. We get to the front and they tell us we're in the wrong freaking line. And we are just like, what do you mean we're in the wrong line? And they're like, this is a special ticket, you need a visa. And oh, by the way, I completely forgot about that. We had asked the other guy about visas and he was just like, no, it's fine. And he just kept saying, no, it's fine, no, it's fine, no, it's fine. So we were just like, what do you mean? And so they're like, you need to be in that line. And we're just like, oh my goodness. The line that we needed to be in had 20 people in it. We could have been in that line and been through so much earlier. And by the way, by this stage it had been like over 3 hours, right? We didn't have our baggage and we were like, what the heck, where is our baggage? Like, is it still going to be on the conveyor belt? Have they taken it? Like, what on earth? Like, because it's not supposed to take you 3 hours to like go through a security check because the bags are on the other side. So anyway, we're like, okay, we hop in that line, we wait in that line, we get to the front and they seem very confused about our ticket. And then they're like, so you need a visa? And then we're like, yes. And they're like, why are you on this ticket? So we had to tell them that our flight was cancelled. They said, why was your flight cancelled? And also no one told us why our flight was cancelled. Everyone we asked were like, why was the flight cancelled? Like, was it something wrong with the plane? Is it weather? Like any kind of reason. And it was the only reason we got every single time was, your flight was cancelled. And we're just like, yeah, we know that, but like, why? Oh, your flight was cancelled. And we were just, oh my gosh. Oh, it's just bringing it all back. Oh my god. Let me just check if I've forgotten anything at this stage. Alright, so yeah, so we go into the special line, we're there, they ask us, you know, why, all these questions, we had to answer them. Finally, she opens up my passport on a brand new page, she gets the stamp and she stamps it, and I know when she stamps that, that means they're letting us into the country. So she stamps it, she puts a date in for the visa to say that we're allowed there. It's a 24-hour visa exemption, so as long as we're out of the country in 24 hours, like we can go in, do whatever we want. And we're just like, thank goodness. And one by one, each of us got through. We were all on different nationality passports. They were so like, they were confused, and it was just like, anyway. So we get through and we go down this escalator, and then there's all the baggage and stuff, and there we see our bags by themselves just going around the thing, and we are so happy. Oh, I think my camera's gonna stop. One sec. I was filming for far too long. This is gonna be long, guys. This is literally like a story time video. My time in China. But yeah, so our baggage is there, and it was just the best feeling. We were like, thank goodness our baggage is here. Like, we had 30 hours in the country. We needed our bags. Like, in my carry-on, I had enough spare stuff, like toiletries and clothes, just in case something happened, and thank goodness I did, because something did happen. But anyway, we get our baggage and we're like, awesome, like we made it in, we've got our baggage, we just need to go to accommodation. It's not an easy airport. So we are walking around this airport asking people where the accommodation place is for China Southern Airlines. That's who we flew with. Never fly with them. I should have said that before. On flight, all good, but in terms of their service and their cancellations of flights, never again, honestly. But yeah, so we asked so many different staff, like, where do we go if we need to go for accommodation? And they kept trying to send us to the departures, because they kept wanting our boarding passes, and we're like, no, we're not leaving, we've just arrived. And just no one could help, so we're like, okay, let's just look around this airport by ourselves. Bearing in mind that there are China Southern Airline, like, information places with people, and nobody could tell us where the accommodation place was. So we walked around this airport, which is massive. It's an H shape, so like if you go somewhere, you literally have to backtrack and then go across and then go up and backtrack, and then it's 3 stories. So it was just like, oh my gosh. So eventually, 20 minutes later of going up and down all kinds of elevators, finding these palm trees and thinking, okay, they're our reference point. We walk and then find this other set of palm trees, and we're like, how on earth, this airport is massive. There's 2 sets of palm trees and you can't see them from other places. Anyway, we find the accommodation place and we're just like, yes. So we hop in that line, which takes 10 minutes, which is like, by this stage, 10 minutes is so fast. We get to the front and then they ask us, why do we need accommodation? The whole shebang. So we tell them the spiel, and then they give us a list of accommodation that we can pick from, which was really good, I thought. Obviously it meant nothing to us because we didn't know where we were. So we just picked one, and then we had to ask, like, you know, is food covered and all this stuff. By the way, accommodation we didn't have to pay for because obviously they cancelled our flight. And then food and stuff, they said, like, you organise it when you get there. And we're like, yeah, but we don't want to pay for it because we don't have any, like, China money, yen. And they're like, it's organised when you get there. You don't pay for it. And we're like, does the hotel know this? Because I'm not used to this. Like, I've never been on a connecting flight in my life, let alone a connecting flight that's cancelled, and let alone being in China. Like, it's just it was all brand new to me. So anyway, we pick a hotel and they give us a sticker that you wear, like you have to wear the sticker on your top, so they know, like, oh, you're going to this place. Like, honestly, it's kind of like primary school where you wear a name badge. It's like, oh, cool, you're with us, kind of thing. So we put those on and they're like, the bus will be here in half an hour, and we're just like, oh, we just want to go. Bearing in mind, guys, we had been up since 5 AM that morning, and it's now like 9 or 9:30 at night, and we're just so tired. We've been on a 12-hour flight, we've stood in lines, we just had to explain ourselves to everyone, literally like we were criminals, honestly. And so anyway, we had to go and find an insurance, like a desk, to get a notice for insurance for Juliana, who we were with. Because obviously she needed to claim back on her accommodation and that kind of thing, and then we needed to get one as well, just in case we need to claim anything with our insurance. So we go through the airport again and we try find this place. And we eventually find a supervisor desk for China Southern, and that's where everyone told us to go after we'd been around the airport. And so we wait and wait and wait. There's only 2 people in front of us. We're like, it shouldn't be long. Literally the first person took 20 minutes, and then the next person was standing there, and so she goes up to the side and asks someone else, like, is this even the right place? Like, this is what we need. And they're like, oh yeah, fine, that's fine. And so we're like, cool, okay. So we waited in line. Eventually we got to the front, only to find out that we were in the wrong queue. It's just like, we were just at this stage, we just all looked at each other, and it was like this pissed off laugh that we did. It was just like, ha 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 ha, sure. So anyway, they tell us that we need to go to the departures desk where you check in for your flight to whatever. What were we doing? Getting documents and stuff. Anyway, a long time later, we eventually get what we needed. We head back downstairs and they're like, yep, the bus is here. And we're like, thank goodness. Like, literally, I think at this time it was 10 p.m. So, no, was it 9:30? It was between 9:30 and 10. I think it was quarter to 10. So it had been like 5 hours since we'd landed. And we were exhausted, like 5 hours in the airport, and we were busy the entire time. Like, we were exhausted. And we hadn't eaten either since we had that breakfast on the plane. So what happened next? We got on the bus, and it was hot, but it was fine. Like, we were going to the right place. But for me, China, they drive on the right side of the road, not the left side of the road, and they drive crazily. Like, everyone's beeping, everyone's changing lanes, like, it's like there's no road rules. And so I'm sitting in this bus like, oh my gosh, like, I don't kind of care about my life right now, I just want to sleep. So I'm just sitting there like watching, and it's pitch black, so I couldn't really film much. I think I filmed a little bit, but I'm not quite sure. And yeah, so I'm just sitting there like, it's so weird, because every time we'd turn, I would expect a car to come flying at us, because I'm used to driving the opposite way. Which is really weird. But anyway, we arrive at our accommodation, and the place looks really nice. Like, it's massive, and I'm like, thank goodness it's not some kind of like shacked up place somewhere. It was actually nice. Like, first world problems, I know, but anyway, like, when you pay for flights and that kind of stuff, you expect a service. And we get there and we get in the line, and then we had to give them our passports and our boarding passes and all that kind of stuff, and we had to explain to the hotel why we were there. And we're like, why are we telling you this? Like, what? And we had to show them our stickers, and then they gave us these little cards for our food. And so it was like, this is for breakfast, lunch, dinner. And we're like, we haven't actually had dinner tonight. So they were like, ah. So they gave us ones for dinner, and they're like, dinner ends in 5 minutes. And so we're like, oh my gosh. Oh no, dinner had ended, and we had 5 minutes if we wanted to order. So of course we get our check-in things, and we go have some food, and then we finally, after that, take our bags upstairs. And we had these 2 ginormous, like, double beds. I think they were double, maybe even queens. I think doubles, actually. They were rock solid, but at this stage I was like a bed, like I can lie down, because remembering the flights, you're sitting for 12 hours, at least where I was sitting anyway. And so yeah, that was day 1 of our trip. I am so sorry that this was so long. I didn't think it was going to be this long, but I want to have this video to look back, and I don't want to miss anything. Did I miss anything else? I know I have to keep referring to this, but it's just, it was just like a shock as to, like, I don't even know. It was just so different. Yeah, I think that was it. So yeah, that's the first part of our journey, day 1 of our holiday, I guess. So the next step was to figure out what on earth we were going to be doing for 24 hours. Yeah, that's day 1, guys. That's what happened. So you'll understand why I didn't vlog much when we landed, because we were just trying to get into the country, get our bags, and like figure out what on earth was going on. Also bearing in mind that I didn't have like a Chinese SIM card or anything, so in the time that we were in the airport, those 5 hours, I spent $60 on my phone texting and like trying to figure out like what was going on. And it was hard because I couldn't access my email, there's no Facebook, so I couldn't message people, there's no Viber, so literally the only way I could contact people was via texting. But yeah, so if you guys want to know what we got up to on our unexpected day in China, day 2 of our holiday, if you can call it that, then make sure to subscribe down below so that you don't miss it. Make sure to turn on my post notifications so you know exactly when I post my videos. And yeah, hit the thumbs up button if you're excited for our holiday. We were gone for 2.5 weeks, so there's a lot of footage to come. The footage to come will be a lot less of this kind of sit down type of video and a lot more like vlogging. Yeah, so I don't know how to end this. I haven't done one of these types of videos in a long time, and that was a lot of memories and that was a lot of talking. So yeah, thank you if you made it all the way through. You guys are awesome. And yeah, I will see you next time for another video. Bye.